So I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not going to pretend to be a medical scientist because I'm not. I fix MacBooks and I do angry videos ranting about the news next to a Christmas tree that I haven't taken down in late July. You probably shouldn't be paying attention to me or taking what I say seriously. That being said, hey everybody. How's it going? So today I wanted to discuss an interesting article that really does take a lot of the conflicts that were going on last year and is a very interesting point at which several of these conflicts intersect, and I thought it would make an interesting video. So here it says that the LA County Sheriff says he won't enforce a new mask order. So here it says the Los Angeles County Sheriff said he won't enforce the new order for masks indoors regardless of vaccination status because it's not backed by science. Sheriff Alex Villanueva contended that the order, set to take effect at 11:59 p.m. on Saturday, contradicts guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, loosening rules for the vaccinated. The masking order came after the metropolitan area of 10 million people added more than 1,000 new COVID-19 cases for a seventh straight day on Thursday, with the transmission rate close to a high level after hitting a substantial pace in a short period of time. According to Muntu Davis, the county's health officer, Friday's infections jumped to 1,902, the highest level since March, and hospitalizations doubled from a month ago. The health department has the authority to enforce the order, but the underfunded/defunded Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department will not expend their limited resources and instead ask for voluntary compliance, Villanueva said in a statement Friday, adding that health officials should instead establish mandates that are both achievable and supported by science. So what he did there is he just unloaded a giant pile of salt on everyone. And yeah, let's just kind of dive into what that salt is. So he says, the underfunded, defunded Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department will not expend our limited resources and instead ask for voluntary compliance. Now, I've read in a lot of news articles, people getting mad at this particular gentleman, a lot of people getting angry in comment sections and Twitter and whatnot. But when you really dig into it, yeah, he is salty. What is he salty about? Our defunded Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is not going to expend our limited resources to do something that the very people who were trying to defund us last year are now asking us to do. And when you take a look at the news, this is one of those things where really everybody walked away feeling like they got screwed. So if you look at this piece of news, they did vote and approve a $150 million cut to the LAPD's budget. So the councilmen, looks like they voted 12-2 in favor of cutting their budget by $150 million. However, later on, they reinstated a portion of that. So they started at $1.86 billion, they cut it down to $1.71 billion, and then they raised it back up to $1.76 billion. So the police themselves are mad because you went from $1.86 to $1.76. So the police are mad because you lowered their budget. And the defund the police people are also mad because you lowered it a little bit, but then you kind of raised it back up about half of what you lowered it, so you barely did anything. So you have both sides there that really walk away feeling like they just didn't get what they were advocating for or asking for or deserve. So they're both pretty aggravated. And here the police are clearly showing their aggravation here that the very order that they're being asked to enforce is A, it's typically not something that you expect the police to be enforcing, and B, the very people asking for this to be enforced are the people who were going for defunding the police in the first place. But it also creates that interesting intersection because a lot of the conversation last year regarding policing was, why don't you send out mental health professionals? Why don't you have more rec centers? Why don't you have more social centers, more job programs? Send out a social worker, send out a mental health professional. Why are you asking the police to do everything when the police should really be reserved for a specific set of things? Let's take a burden off of the police that likely shouldn't be on the police to take care of. Yet then a year later, you're asking people that carry mace and pepper spray and guns and armored vehicles to enforce people putting a cloth covering over their face when they walk inside of a Walmart. That seems to be very contradictory. If what we're doing is we're trying to limit the scope of what the police do to ensure that police brutality is decreased, then we should be seeking to only utilize the police when the police are absolutely necessary. And I would perhaps make the suggestion that asking the police to enforce an order after vaccines are widespread available after, a long time, that freely available, you can get at virtually any pharmacy in the United States of America, that you not ask people with guns, pepper spray, and armored vehicles to be the ones that are telling people, you must put this over your face. That just seems to go counter to what a lot of the conversation last year was about. And I find that particularly interesting. And you could also see that this guy is saying, listen, I'm I'm not. No, I know that this is going to put me at odds with the community. It's going to create a lot of bad will. It's going to create a lot of aggravation, and I don't feel like being put in that position for people that are trying to take our budget away that don't even like us to begin with. So I'm not going to listen to you when you create this mask mandate. And I don't particularly blame this policeman, because this is not something that's going to, this is not something that's going to create violence in the community. It's not something that's going to upend and destabilize everything. But if he starts going in there saying, "Excuse me, sir, I have here's my badge, you need to put this on," it's just going to create more aggravation with communities that likely just want to be left alone by the police. Even the ones that may particularly not be fans of the police, even the ones that don't like the police, that probably are spray painting ACAB on buildings, would likely not want to have the police in charge of enforcing a mask mandate. Now, to continue to read this article, it says the restriction comes just 1 month after LA, along with the rest of California, lifted masking and social distancing restrictions. He said the new rules seemed aimed more at ease of enforcement, though the unvaccinated are at less risk and less likely to spread the disease. In the county, those who are unvaccinated accounted for 99.6% of new cases from December 7th to June 7th, making it clear that trying to have vaccinated people wear them is just kind of crazy. But then we're getting into a point where the reason they may be trying to apply it to everybody is because they don't want to then try to push the idea of a vaccine passport, because that will get even more pushback from a public that, again, is at the ends of their rope when it comes to the police. So I completely understand why the police are probably saying to themselves, "Listen, you want to call me to your house because of domestic violence or a fight or a stabbing? I'm there, but mask mandate, no." In addition to Villanueva, Catherine Barger, one of the county supervisors, also pushed back on the latest order. "I'm concerned by rising cases, but I don't believe the mask mandate will help efforts to stress vaccine efficacy and compel unvaccinated residents to get vaccinated," Barger said, adding that Los Angeles should not deviate from state policy because it creates confusion and disagreements. Now, I agree partially here, particularly with the idea that if your goal is to encourage people to come vaccinated, that mask mandates are not going to do it. There's this idea that maybe if we tell them they can take off their mask when they get vaccinated, we'll get people vaccinated, but it fundamentally misses the point as to why many people don't get vaccinated. To be clear, and just to get rid of it, just to be upfront with everybody in this video, I got the Moderna shot several months ago, so I am fully vaccinated. So any bias that I have hopefully will, at least now you know where I'm coming from. I appreciate it when the authors of these opinion pieces or articles give you an idea of where they're coming from. That's why I'm telling you that. But the people who don't want to get vaccinated, I'm just going to try and steelman their argument here and get inside their head, is I don't trust you because you've tried to take away my freedoms. You have told me that I cannot go to work and must shut down my business, while simultaneously not coming up with any solution to pay my mortgage or my employees or anything else during that period of time. So I don't trust you, I don't like you, and I'm now going to do the exact opposite of what you said. I spoke to a friend of mine's wife, who said contrarianism is not itself a political ideology, and I agree with her, but at the same time, I understand where they're coming from. What they're saying is, I don't trust you. A lot of these rules seem arbitrary and asinine and ridiculous and for show. I don't trust you. You almost tried to ruin my life and my finances, so whatever you tell me to do, I'm not doing it. Screw you. So you have to understand, if you want to, you have to understand your adversary's pain point and where they're coming from in order to encourage them to do what you want in a negotiation. And if they don't like you because they believe that you're using force heavy-handedly to try to control people, then trying to control them even more, but say, "We'll stop trying to control you if you do what we want," is not particularly the way to encourage people to actually change. That's why, like, I've had people say, "Why don't you speak out on this? Why don't you try to get more people to get a vaccine? Why don't you use your platform or your channel for it?" And it's, again, listen, I got it because it made sense for me to get it, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. And honestly, it wouldn't even work. Even if I actually were to get up here and say, "You should get vaccinated," the people who don't want to get the vaccine are not getting it just because somebody in authority tells them to. The people who watch this channel tend to be people who are part of an audience of individuals that agree with me that one central authority should not constantly be telling us what we can or cannot fix, not constantly trying to control our lives by controlling our property. And there's a lot of overlap between people who believe in that and people who also just so happen to not want to feel like their government officials are trying to control them. And there's also a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram between people who don't want their government to control them and people who don't want want to take a vaccine. I understand that about my audience. I can read it in the comment section. So I'm not even going to try to tell you what to do because it's ridiculous. It doesn't matter what I think. It just fundamentally wouldn't be effective. So it would be a waste of my time, and I would lose authority in the eyes of my audience if I even tried to do that. So I don't. In fact, if somebody who has authority tries to use a heavy hand or get them to do it, they'll at this point, when you understand the reasoning behind why people want to do the opposite, you understand that it's fundamentally pointless to use more heavy-handed policy to get people to do what you want, because that's a lot of what was done over the past year and a half, and it's why you got the pushback that you did. And a lack of understanding of that will likely lead to, sadly, more deaths. It says over here, still, some California cities may join LA's move as the Delta variant pushes cases higher. 7 Bay Area counties that include San Francisco and Silicon Valley areas are recommending that residents wear masks again indoors in public places, regardless of vaccination status, starting this weekend. The debate over LA's mask order is also spilling into state politics, where challengers of Governor Gavin Newsom's recall race in September are opposing the move. Vaccinated individuals don't need to wear masks. Medical experts have made that clear, says Kevin Falconer, a former San Diego mayor who called the order unnecessary and that he'd oppose it if he were the governor. Reality TV star and former Olympian Caitlyn Jenner called the requirement for face coverings Gavin shut down 2.0. The mask debate could emerge in other cities as well, with a surge in cases. As New York State reported more than 1,000 new cases for the first time since mid-May, a city council member called for a return to the mask mandates in indoor public spaces. We need to reverse this trend, City Councilman Mark DeLevine, who chairs the health committee. It's time to renew the indoor mask mandate. So this is what he posted on Twitter. It's time to renew the indoor mask mandate. Here's something that I just found particularly funny when you check out his Twitter. All right. Again, I'm not saying, I get the point. I'm just saying that when you're a public figure and this is your public social media account and the message that's coming across in the news is it's time to renew a mask mandate, that this is probably not the Twitter video to have as your pinned thing on your Twitter. Just saying. It's like 30 seconds of people taking their masks off. And
Spring is here, and Manhattan's reopening, but underneath is
looking at you like, free at last, free at last. I just find that to be a very entertaining dichotomy, that the moment I click on his Twitter account, after he says we need to redo a mask mandate, is you just have everybody taking their mask off and saying, yes, freedom. It's just, it's a particularly interesting piece of mixed messaging there. Now, again, for me, where I stood with this, I was very clear on this last year. I did a video called Wearing a Mask During COVID, My Opinion as a Business Owner. So for me, the way I looked at it, I linked to about 60 or 70 scientific studies here where they're going over how all this shit works. Again, the way it was explained to me is that wearing one of these masks, like the surgical mask, it's not going to keep me from getting shit. What it does is it decreases the likelihood of me giving it to somebody else. So if everybody in the room wears it, if I decrease my likelihood of giving it to you and you decrease your likelihood of giving it to me, then we're better off than if we weren't wearing it. Which makes sense. Again, it's not going to keep me from getting it if I wear it, but if we both wear it, it both decreases both of our chances of getting it. Now, for me, let's say I'm wrong. So here's the way I do it. There's this one book, I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it was Discrimination and Disparities by Thomas Sowell. And one of the things he talks about in the first chapter of the book is when you don't have knowledge, when you don't know how things are going to go, typically what you do is you look at the worst case scenario for either of your choices. So that's how I believe my brain analyzed this. So I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not going to pretend to be a medical scientist because I'm not. I fix MacBooks and I do angry videos ranting about the news next to a Christmas tree that I haven't taken down in late July. You probably shouldn't be paying attention to me or taking what I say seriously. That being said, when I looked at this, I looked at what the worst case scenario was if I was wrong in each case. So I have all my employees wear masks because I want to protect them. Let's say that I'm wrong. Let's say that I'm 100% wrong. What's the worst case scenario? Lewis wasted $2 to $3 a day buying these surgical masks, and we all looked like an idiot for about a year. So we'll look back on these pictures at some point in our lives and go, wow, weren't we stupid? That's the worst case scenario. I waste $2 to $3 a day as a business owner that has 14 employees, and we look like idiots. Now, let's say that I don't have them wear masks. Worst case scenario there is everybody gets sick, and Lewis is stuck paying $15,000 to $20,000 a week in payroll and $12,000 a month in rent with no income when all of his employees are sick and can't show up to work to fix anything. So regardless of what actually works, which scientific studies are correct? Are the studies I linked to in this video correct? Are the studies that the anti-maskers linked to are correct? Regardless of that, what I did is I looked at what the worst case scenario was for both. and came to my own informed decision that the worst case scenario, if Lewis has everybody at the store wear masks while working, is honestly worlds better than worst case scenario if everybody doesn't wear a mask. With these two potential decisions, one of them has a cost, if I'm wrong, of mildly inconveniencing me over the course of a year. The other decision, if I'm wrong, has a cost of 14 to 18K a week, my entire business going bankrupt, and ruining my life. Given that the costs are so far apart between these two decisions, it made no sense for me to go with not wearing masks when the cost of wearing masks, if I'm wrong, was so much lower than the potential cost of not wearing them if I was wrong. And I believe that I've treated the people that work at this facility fair over the years. I think that some of the people that I've stolen from other companies that either paid less or treated them poorly, that didn't try to consider them as human beings, I think I had earned from them that if I asked them to do this for me as a favor, that they do it. And for the most part, they did. And I genuinely appreciate that of them. And I also just put it out there. Listen, if everybody here gets sick at the same time as a result of this happening, I ain't Bill Gates. Like I'm not paying 14 people if all of you get sick at the same time and there's no revenue. That's again, that could last for like this long, but it'll last for this long. And then this won't be a company anymore. And then because it's bankrupt, and then everybody's going to a you break, I fix. And then we're all stuck making 14 or 17 bucks an hour. And that's not really going to be much fun, particularly for the higher level employees who have worked their way up here over 7 or 8 years. So for me, it just kind of made sense. But after vaccines were widely available, after once I had already gotten COVID, beat COVID, got vaccinated, and then after that, there were several months for everybody else in the country to get vaccinated. At that point, I stopped wearing masks constantly all the time. If I am walking into a place and I look in and everybody has a chin bra on or no mask at all, I'll go in without a mask because I've got COVID, I beat COVID, and I got vaccinated from it. And if I walk into a place and it says, please wear a mask, I'll look inside. I'll see, like, is that sign up there just to keep de Blasio and the DCA away, or is that sign up there because you mean it? If I see everybody in there with a mask, I'll put mine on to respect the rules of that business and to respect someone else's house. I would expect people to respect my rules when they come to my business or my house, and I'll respect their rules when I go to their business or their house. For me, I was all for wearing them. I had no problem with it. Again, it's kind of annoying, but again, the cost for me being wrong about masks was much lower for me wearing them than if I didn't. So I chose to. At this point in time, with everybody, with vaccines being freely available, I just don't care as much as I did before. I'm spelling this out here because I've gotten comments saying that, you swallow this hook, line, and sinker, and other people that have said Lewis believes that COVID is fake, and neither of these are even remotely true. I don't think people care or listen to what people say anymore. They just look for that like one little snippet that they can use to reinforce their bias as to what they think an individual believes, so that they can either blindly support them or blindly rage at them. So that's what I think of this. I think it's a very interesting intersection that if we learned anything over the past year, it seems that what would make a lot of the public happy is stop using the police for everything. Let's reserve the police for when it's absolutely necessary, but let's not call the police out for petty stuff that then winds up escalating out of control. And a year after that, we're asking the police to enforce a mask mandate after millions upon millions and tens of millions in the country have been vaccinated for COVID. So that's just it really seems interesting to me that in the areas that seem to have the loudest protests, this is going on. It's seemingly no concept that maybe, just maybe, the lesson from last year would be, at the very least in these areas, let's not ask the people with guns, batons, peppered spray, and armored vehicles to enforce putting a piece of cloth over your face when you go to Walmart. But you let me know what you think in the comments down below. Does this sound like does this sound sensible to you, or does this sound like ridiculous? I don't know. Let me know what you think of what I think. I'll see you all later, and I'll leave a link to all this stuff down below for anybody who's interested. Thank you for watching, and as always, I hope you learned something.